Okay. All right. Let's discuss a little bit the blockchain revolution. First of all, from the business side and from the future side now. How do you see the blockchain's relevance for multinational corporations in the next year, in the upcoming year, Mr. Falk?
I can speak for our industry, and I see what possibilities there are and how we progress it. I see what in the finance industry happens. So there are many opportunities. We just talked about that. Everybody is talking about the hype and things going on, but it's not tangible now. So many use cases are happening, and I only can agree with Alex. So start now to work on it. So there will be something. I can't tell about the outcome now and how big it will, but it will have an impact, and better be first than not involved in all, because they just have learned it's not the big ones anymore eating the small ones. It's the ones being faster than the slower ones, and so if you start and think about that, I think that will help.
Mm. What is the view of SAP, I went on to blockchain in 2017?
It's very different depending on which industries you're looking at. Financial services has a first mover advantage in a way, but they are now at a position where they start facing struggles as well, so with standards, legal regulations and things. So I believe we will see cases in financial services that are close to production, potentially some selected productive cases, which probably won't be large scale, but hopefully it will be sufficient to sustain the momentum, because that's more marathon than a sprint here we're in. But it needs a couple of successes along the way, otherwise it just will shift to other topics or just die down if it cannot be proven. There are some potential other industries that might even beat financial services to the punch, and I would bet, I would think about utilities, for example, having some interesting cases here.
What's your view, Alex, onto 2017 and the blockchain revolution?
Well, I think, having been researching this for a few years, the rate of adoption in 2015-16 was tremendous. When we first started researching for the book, no major financial services firm had announced an initiative in this space. And within 18 months, every single one had. So there's a lot of people putting their toes in the water, joining consortiums, doing POCs, etc. But as has been pointed out here, a lot of it is still very early stage. And 2017 will be the year where we need to see major commercial implementation by large industry players in order for this to sustain its momentum. I think it's unlikely, truthfully, that big companies will be the ones to first disrupt their own industries. I think it's much more likely that the startups in the industry who have received an aggregate over $1 billion of funding over the past 2 years will surprise many over the next 12 months in a wide variety of industries. So I think that we're at a state right now of high expectations, not overly inflated expectations, but high expectations, and the next 12 months will be critical to the momentum of the industry.
Mm. Now, coming back to this consortium, the B3E consortium. Now, you explained in the presentation that it was, okay, we wanted to get started, and this is how it happened. Was there a strategic thought through of having not, of building not from the first day on an international consortium that includes US or Americas or APAC consortium members as well, to have a global consortium, real global consortium to strengthen the standards from the beginning on?
No, because the how it developed was that some of them joined the consortium or the initiative, and now it's just created and is going to grow. So we didn't thought about gathering to a certain extent from certain areas and then start. And we also heard the presentation of Alex and Samai when he said, "Get started, do it." So it just happened like it is, and we are happy to find someone in the Arab or in the US area which will join. But the first goal was to start because we had some use cases, and I think it wouldn't have made it better if we just tried to get the whole world in. So we now have something. We got a press release. People get aware of it, and if they are now interested, and it looks like some of them will, they now come to us and ask how to join and how to cooperate. So I think it doesn't make sense to start only with a certain limit, but if you feel you have some to kick off, then kick off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, coming towards the SAP's blockchain strategy, Raimund, how come that SAP, as a major European software development company, is not, let's say, embracing the blockchain technology, participating in consortiums, being part of that revolution? I mean, an active part and being in consortiums and developing software on this base.
Good one, thank you. I share a slightly different perspective on that, which is, I don't want to sound arrogant here, but the success of SAP carries certain responsibilities, and if like 2/3 or 70% of the world GDP are running through your system, you don't make those fundamental decisions lightheartedly. So what we're always trying to find is the control and the balance between using the opportunity and participating in these activities, but also finding the right approach to keep existing customers, existing investments secure, safe, and transfer them gradually. And with the wrong statements at a too early point in time, you can just ruin the whole thing as well. I'm one of the probably most positive proponents about blockchain within SAP, but there's also the rest of the company which you have to
take it to slight consideration.
Also include in these type of things. So I'm working on it.
All right.
And Bill is part of his book, at least on the blurbs and the head starter section. So
yeah, so everyone should read it. And the
next up is for Bill to buy copies for every person in SAP.
Do you work on that?
You'll work on that.
I need your help. It's a different level of paychecks we're talking here, so I need your help with that.
Now, coming back to your HANA technology, Raimund, how does HANA fit into blockchain? Does it boost performance? Does it support this tendency towards distributed ledger technology?
I think those two things are complementary in a way of looking at the technology. You have that HANA piece, which is central, very fast, and then you have that blockchain, decentralized, very secure, comparably slow type of data store. And in between you have something where there's a sort of sweet spot for both technology to participate or to benefit from the other. So, for example, think about analytics and predictions you could do on that blockchain-based data storage type of things. Blockchain technologies are not very good at these type of things. So this is one piece where HANA could help. And on the other hand, blockchain is a secure storage without a doubt, providing trust and transparency. So if you want to have a triple ledger type of setup, you want to have additional data storage, we've been discussing moving locks to a secure space, which could be blockchain space, for example, then that's maybe the place to go. And this is where those type of technologies are complementary.
Now coming to this issue of, let's say, performance and mining. Alex, we've heard prior to your presentation that, well, this mining process takes a while, let's say, and that the feedback out of the blockchain is not real time, whether the block can be written or not. So whenever a transaction happens, it takes, let's say. What do you see as tendencies that the blockchain is growing? So Bitcoin is growing, Ethereum is growing, and still there are major struggles with the performance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it fits into the implementation challenge category. There are so many examples of transactions where if you could reduce the clearing and settlement time to 10 minutes, you'd be improving it by 1,000-fold. But there are other examples where that would be a real pain in the butt. Like if you were buying something at a store, you wouldn't want to wait 10 minutes for the merchant to validate the transaction you cleared. You'd want it to clear it in half of a second or less. So there are sort of two ways to look at that. One is, well, maybe there are use cases for that blockchain's not suited to. Or you could say maybe this is just a technical challenge that needs to be overcome. And I think in the public blockchain arena, Bitcoin and Ethereum and elsewhere, there's a lot of very interesting work being done to try and compress the time to validate a transaction from the traditional cycle to something much, much shorter. And what I hear from the people who are developing that technology is very, very encouraging. There's also, alternatively, the distributed ledger or private blockchain world where you don't necessarily need to rely upon a system that's completely trustless. You only really need this like incredibly laborious proof of work system. If nobody trusts anybody, and if there's an assumption that there are actors in the system, they're actively trying to undermine it in some way. So in the example of a collection of insurance companies or a collection of investment banks or whatever, they might not trust each other to act in the other's best interest. In fact, in the world of financial services, that the point is kind of not to. It's a zero-sum game, so someone has to win and someone has to lose. But they can all at least trust that everyone's in it to make money and to keep the system afloat. No one's trying to undermine it in any way. So, with something like a private blockchain, you've got fewer actors, better connected actors, because they're all large companies running big computers. So you've got the ability to conduct transactions and do validation much, much faster. What you're giving up are the network effects, which make the network more valuable with every new user, and the open source mentality, which enables improvements to happen in real time. So there are trade-offs to each of these systems.
Now from the B3 initiative, what technology and what architecture did you choose?
Well, it's depending on the providers of the RFP we are asking for, but what is used for obviously makes sense is Ethereum, Iris, Hyperledger, so whatever the most convincing pitch will, but we are open to that, and as I already mentioned, that might change over time. There might be evolutions, or there might be new techniques, but well, we are open to that.
Well, that means public blockchain and
Public
not
blockchain.
not a private solution, private blockchain solution.
Most likely a public one. It's a private. There are some players who offer private blockchain, and they want to drive a license project or license model behind it. For the time being, we're looking for an open one, which we then can use for ourselves, or which we can then customize. But we are not that much relying on the provider.
All right. Now, Alex, a personal question. Well, as Germans, we're a little critical, let's say, towards taking risk and applying new technologies such as blockchain. What's your view
Of Germans? This is
Well,
great.
now
This
it's
is
a
personal.
critical question. From from the entrepreneurial perspective, what do you see? How is Germany, let's say, situated with the blockchain technology compared to other countries?
Well, I think Germany, like other places, like say Canada or the United Kingdom, have all the right preconditions to be really, really successful in this industry. You know, they've got very well-educated workforce, a strong history of innovation and invention. You know, great engineering culture, tons of capital. So all of these preconditions are there for Germany to be a center for innovation. But there are other places too that are actively competing for this. And a good analogy to use is the first generation of the internet. When the internet came about and the development of the World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee, most of the connected computers in the world were in the United States. The ARPANET was in the United States. There was an established tech industry in Silicon Valley. And the US basically controlled the sandbox for the internet for 25 years. We live in a completely different world today, where access to technology is ubiquitous, at least in the developed world, and where we've got 25 years of hindsight and practice doing this kind of stuff. So I think it's anybody's game at this point. You know, I think that you'll see a less centralized industry. You know, for whatever reason, it's been like this all or none thing where Silicon Valley has attracted most of the capital, where most of the entrepreneurs go, where most of the biggest companies have been created. This time could be different. So in the blockchain world, Berlin is really, really become quite a center, mostly on the entrepreneurial side, less on like big industry. Singapore, like Shanghai and Beijing, Toronto, London and New York, because of the financial vector of this technology, have been very, very influential. So it's definitely, the stakes are high, but it's anybody's opportunity. What any one country can do is, you know, I don't want to overstate the role of government and policy, because a lot of it is organic and it relies on the culture and stuff like that. But there are things that the state can do to make it easier for innovators to do business and to thrive, just by creating an environment that's conducive to it. And I think that Germany does a very good job of that.
Now, coming to your to the blockchain's possibilities, what are the current trends from your global perspective? And is there the trend of corporates using more public, more the private blockchain? Is there this need or necessity for changeable blockchain? Yes or no? Do you see the blockchain used by more by startups, by corporates? What is your opinion?
So initially when big companies got involved, the mantra was Bitcoin bad, blockchain good. Mm-hmm. That they loved the idea of a system to do transactions that were secured and reduce friction and cost, but they bristled at the idea of opening up their transactions and their businesses to some open, anonymized network. And for good reason in some situations. Using financial services as an example, it's called KYC in the States, know your customer rules. And know your customer rules in a lot of jurisdictions not only apply to your customers, they also apply to your counterparties and to your vendors. So you need to know a lot about the vendor that you're using. And so if you're using an anonymous network of miners to validate a transaction, you might actually be in breach of KYC. So that was the kind of initial argument from a lot of big players. That's now swung backwards. And I think that has to do largely with education, where it's not like they've swung back to Bitcoin, but it's now, what's the best technology for the use case that we're trying to address here? And in a lot of cases, it's been working with existing vendors like Microsoft, who happen to be putting their bet on Ethereum, or it could be through IBM, who's really active in Hyperledger, where is Hyperledger a private blockchain or a public blockchain? It's sort of a hybrid of sorts. So I think that it's just because the industry is evolving, more and more corporates are exploring all of the options, and a lot of that has to do with how they've become more informed as a result of having spent a year doing this stuff.
Okay. Now, if we, how did you, or what was the reason that you started working on the blockchain revolution, on writing the book 3 or 4 years ago, where in the rest of the world, let's say, not all of us has been talking about blockchain. So from my point of view, it was a visionary view. How did this idea develop?
Well, like a lot of ideas, it didn't start with a grand master plan at all. It started because I was very interested in Bitcoin, and I started getting interested in 2013, which in the Bitcoin community is sort of it's not super early; it's sort of mid-level. And I was fascinated by this technology, and it was really just a sort of coincidence of sorts that at the time that I was spending more and more time playing around with the technology and, trading the currency, that Don Tapscott, my father, was running a research project at the University of Toronto, looking at how technology was being applied to solve global problems that used to be solved by governments or, state-based institutions like the UN or the World Trade Organization. And one of the things that they were trying to untangle was Bitcoin, well before blockchain really entered the vernacular. And I'd spent a few years in the financial services industry. I had a CFA charter, and so he basically recruited me to participate in this project and run this project and do this report. And so that led to our first sort of joint effort, which was a paper called the Bitcoin Governance Network. And that led to other research looking at eventually blockchain's impact on lots of different things: financial services, government and democracy, the firm, etc. And that research became the basis for the book. His publisher came to him and said, "This is a really, interesting topic. No one really understands it. You and Alex happen to have spent the past 12 months researching this. Would you be interested in collaborating together on a book?" Which was kind of like an offer you can't refuse in a lot of ways. So we put together a proposal, took it to them, they liked it, and we got to work. So that would have been in January of 2015. Mm-hmm. And so throughout 2015, we conducted the research. We interviewed 150 people across every industry, including government, financial services, etc. Visited companies operating in this industry all around the world, and produced a manuscript for the publisher, and went to print in May. And that's the story.
That's pretty fast development, I would say. All right.
Yeah, well, our big... So books about technology, by definition, have a shelf life. Mm. It's just the way it is. So, going back to what I said originally, in the course of writing a book like this, you just hope to God, when you put send the final manuscript in February, you hope by May that it's not completely obsolete and redundant, because things have changed, and all of a sudden, your views on the subject seem rather quaint. So, it's our hope that this book will be relevant and continue to be relevant for at least 5 years. At which point, the sequel.
Revolution strikes back, right?
The Empire strikes back.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Now, questions from the audience side. Please.
My name is Armin Vor. I'm with Diskussion, that's a German certification and testing technology. I was surprised that you didn't mention security, or the software quality aspect and all of that. I haven't seen a software project yet that really operates flawlessly and doesn't leave behind potential vulnerabilities. Mm. How do you judge sort of the dangers coming from that direction?
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe I would like to raise that question towards, first of all, the consortium. Is the security aspect a major issue in your RFP also currently?
Well, it is an issue, but for the time being, as we work in a close community, so we can get first ideas, we can make experiences, but of course the security issue is something which we address in the RFP, but to be honest, all of us or most of us have to make experience with the outcome to see whether it's, well, people can tell you anything, but you have to see it yourself and to get it proof. So I haven't heard about major problems in other POCs. Even the DAO hack, which we just talked about, that was not a security issue. That was just a mistake in the programming which someone made use of. But other secure, you would know better of any security issues.
No, that's a great point, and it's important to distinguish because you hear a lot about Bitcoin getting hacked, but it's actually not the protocol that's getting hacked. It's some intermediary that's operating with the currency. So it's a similar problem to what you might have if Morgan Stanley got hacked, or LinkedIn got hacked, or Yahoo got hacked. So I don't think blockchain's a panacea for every single problem that an enterprise faces. There's still lots of enterprise security that needs to happen. But the system is more secure. The idea of distributing trust and distributing consensus across a network rather than keeping it in the hands of one party is a much better way to secure valuable information and to secure transactions. And the Bitcoin network is a good reference point for this. So if you wanted to sort of hack the Bitcoin network, to say send the same Bitcoin twice, going back to that original example of double spend, it wouldn't be as easy as just moving a number in a spreadsheet. You'd have to hack this network across thousands, maybe millions of computers, and do so in a very short period of time. And you'd also have to fight back against a network that marshals a lot of computing power, and you'd have to outmuscle it. And by some estimates, that computing resource is anywhere between 10 and 100 times the size of all of Google's server farms combined. So that's practically speaking very, very challenging to do. So within the underlying core protocol, the technology itself, security issues are actually way less of a concern, but that doesn't relieve companies from the burden of securing other information that's not stored on a blockchain.
If I may add to that, I was more worried about sort of the reliability consequences. If you have a software-based system or infrastructure and that goes down, look at the recent DDoS attack in the US, where you have tons of URLs not being accessible anymore. What's the danger there? And you talked about the opportunities for Germany. And I've lived 20 years in the States where I didn't carry any cash. I was just used paying with a credit card. Try doing that here in Germany, and it's very hard to do that. Now you're proposing a system that takes you even a step further towards e-payment and e-transactions. So I don't think it's a matter of technology. I think it's a matter of state of mind of the people that you want to get sort of involved with that.
Okay.
Well, maybe to add to that, I see the distributed ledger technology and as an advantage as you have distributed systems compared to if you have a centralized system. So it's most likely easier to hack or to attack a centralized system than a distributed system, if that somehow answers your question.
I just don't like your probably in that sentence.
Well, probably. Every system is hackable, so. But it turns out that if you have distributed systems, distributed identical systems, then you have to hack at least 51% of the systems to get access to something or to manipulate something.
There was another question raised, or a hand at least.
Yes. So, we talked about trust in blockchain, and one fundamental and key part of blockchain is solving the trust issue. And blockchain is a new technology, and people often are afraid and scared of new technology. So how do you reach the point where people who actually have a hard time understanding the blockchain technology actually trust the technology?
Well, I'm of the view that the technology will remain largely invisible to most people. I don't think you're ever going to log into the blockchain like you log on to the internet. And I think most technology is kind of fading into the background anyway because it's become so ubiquitous in our life. In Indonesia, they did a poll asking everyone, how many of you use the internet? And 50% answered yes. And then they said, how many of you use either WeChat or Facebook? And 75% said yes. So like, what the hell? So I don't think, and I challenge anybody, well, maybe not you guys because you're pretty clever, but if you were to go in the street and say, like, what does HTML stand for? Like, no one would know the answer to that, right? You don't have to know how the internet works to use it, and you don't know how the blockchain works to have it impact your life, basically.
So the consequence for my question, the title of the book, Blockchain Revolution, is quite bold. In my point of view, there should be somehow stated a niche revolution.
Yeah, that's not that title doesn't sell as well. Niche revolution.
Because I pointed out in this course that there are certain, in my research, I named it solution spaces, which blockchain technology is applicable to. What's your opinion about that and how it can be adopted in more fields than just the typical examples?
The two examples being what?
And the typical examples like...
Oh, the typical examples.
Etc.
Well, I think as I talked about in the presentation, there are ways that this technology can be applied to not obvious industries, like music or sharing economy models, or even to changing the way governments work. I'm not really sure how much more broad I can get than that. I mean, we're not talking about making banking cheaper and faster. We're talking about transforming the nature of industries and the architecture of companies. I think that's not niche-y. Please.
Blockchain is set to set standards and bring islands together. In your 3BI initiative, who takes the responsibility if there's a bug in one of the smart contracts? Is it always Swiss way?
I would be happy to blame them or my colleague from Unigree, but it's a jointly initiative, so we all work on that and we all responsible. So for the time being,
You're moving you have the same problem of agreeing on the responsibilities and shared responsibilities.
Yeah.
So you're moving the problem from a technical point to another, but you still have it.
Yeah, maybe to
Marcus is the technical expert. He's part of the initiative.
So for one part, you are not yet decided to go productive. We are exploring, and the big issue we have to solve is governance of such a system. We are close to the private consortium, and we want to have a regulatory governance around it. And that is also one of the work streams to figure out how to govern such a system. As it's a new technology, there are no best practices and we have to develop.
I know, but my question is, the idea of blockchain is to move away from central agencies towards shared responsibility. Now, coming to agreeing on a shared contract, on a contract, you come back again to the same problem of you have to sit together and find a kind of legal body somehow. Right?
Well, maybe I'll jump in. So, blockchain doesn't allow firms to abdicate their responsibility to duty of care and to being careful about stuff. I think if you're going to develop a smart contract to either automate a process that's done with a paper contract or to change a business process completely, then you need to take the same level of care and the same level of diligence as you would in any other business decision. And this technology is best applied to extremely routine contracts. Like you take something that you've already been doing for 20 years, where you have to shuffle paper between parties and fax it and use intermediaries, and you move it to a digital format where everyone can agree and it self-executes with automatic payments. There's not a lot of controversy around that. Everyone establishes the rules of the road, that becomes a template, and then you run all your business logic through that template. there shouldn't be much controversy. And in the case of a mistake, then it's up to everyone to resolve collectively. I actually think that the most exciting area of law for the next 20 years will be smart contract resolution. Because there are examples where the intent of a contract and what's written in the contract don't always align because of how it was phrased with flaws. I don't mean smart contracts, I mean like regular contracts. And eventually, you know, the hope is that you can use this technology to automate lots of stuff, but occasionally there will be disputes. So again, this isn't about completely removing all of the existing, you know, bodies from business. It's just about making it easier and simpler and reducing the chance of, you know, failure, risk, or fraud in those transactions.
Yeah, but that's also a problem because a lot of legal contracts are intentionally
Vague?
vague. And the smart contracts are
It's black or white.
that is something we have to better understand and find the right use case.
Yeah, I mean, I always say, like, I don't think that the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a contract, is ever going to be a smart contract. It's like a little too complicated. But if you own a share in a company which entitles you to a dividend payment every month, that can be a smart contract. What's the controversy in that? You know, the payroll contract between an employer and an employee, that can be a smart contract, you know. The agreement between a policyholder and an insurance company. There's like, these things are not that complicated if everyone can agree on clear, definitive language.
Yeah, when it comes to what is a justified claim and what not, it's not
Well, you're the insurance expert. I leave that to you.
All right. Well, I would suggest 2 more questions, and then we continue elsewhere.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a large discussion on the community on which blockchain is better, permissioned or permissionless. Alex, in your opinion, which one has a brighter future, permissioned, permissionless, or like a mix, like in Hyperledger?
So I view all of the money that's been spent in distributed ledger technology, Hyperledger, Ethereum, Bitcoin, etc., as basically just R&D into a very, very nascent industry. And I don't think doesn't make sense now to pick sides. However, I think that Ethereum has many of the attributes to be successful in lots of different use cases. It has the benefit of being open, which enables lots of innovation, open source innovation and network effects. But it's also robust in that it has smart contracting logic built in. And it's been adopted by lots of big companies. So, you know, if I were to bet my money on something, it would probably be Ethereum.
We heard before that the Bitcoin actually seems to eat up so much energy. Does it mean that blockchain technology is not very green? Or is it Bitcoin specific?
It's a great question. Yeah, by some estimates, the Bitcoin blockchain uses as much power as the city of Los Angeles to run itself, which if it's going to, if you were to say hypothetically that what Visa does and MasterCard does and the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ and the DAX and everybody else does is going to move to the Bitcoin blockchain, it would probably consume as much energy as the sun or something like that. I just made that up, to be clear. No, but the idea is like, it's non-linear in how it scales. So, you know, the Bitcoin blockchain, one of two things needs to happen. Either the Bitcoin blockchain will never be the basis for all of this stuff, and it'll be other implementations, or you need to create a technical solution to make it more scalable. And those two things are parallel paths which are currently ongoing today. And it's too early to say which way it will go. In terms of more green, you can make the argument that, you know, brick and mortar banks, you know, running through reams and reams of paper, cutting down like millions of acres of trees to like push checks around is also not very green. So what's less green? You know, I don't know.
One last question.
Yeah, just a revolutionary question now, because do you think that the blockchain itself has the ability was powerful enough to replace transactions, so traditional transactions from the banking sectors. Because when I think about typical transactions that the private customers do, retrieving money from their cash automators, doing micro transactions, etc., can these fintechs that are just establishing themselves on the markets just replace this everything from the banks? This is a kind of flattening of the hierarchy in the end to replace the monolithic structures from the banks. But isn't this the actual danger of the banks, to lose this impact on the market?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this is what
Well,
I
I
think,
mean,
because 50 years or so, no bank will exist in the form that they are at the moment.
Well, I think that's a fair statement. No bank will exist in the form that it exists today, but that doesn't mean that there won't be banks. They will just perform different roles and maybe do less in some areas and more in others. I do think that, you know, the basic building blocks of retail banking, which are payments and savings. You know, from payments and savings comes lending and everything else, right? Payments and savings will probably move to sort of a public utility model where you can't actually make money on processing payments or on storing money. You're not even supposed to make money on storing money, but the interest rate environment as it is, people actually do. So there's still lots of room for, you know, providing access to credit, investment advice, tax planning, you know, insurance, risk management, accounting, et cetera, that will still be areas of growth for all sorts of financial firms and areas that are kind of not obvious, like what NASDAQ is doing in the power market. So NASDAQ, we think of as a company that's, you know, a market maker, or rather a market provider in financial assets. They view themselves as a technology company whose core competency is markets. So if transactions in something like, say, public equities were to settle bilaterally between individuals and be, you know, 24-hour-a-day marketplace where everyone kind of trusts in the technology and doesn't need a venue to trade, then NASDAQ loses in that market. But what they're doing now is they're partnering with companies in Silicon Valley to develop an energy solution for distributed power grids, where, you know, energy that's generated gets bundled into an asset, a digital asset that is powered by NASDAQ, and they create the marketplace for a new power market. So it's kind of like that's a tangential way of thinking from a bank's perspective. I think it's wrong to just look at this opportunistically. This isn't only about cutting costs and reducing friction. You know, Santander Bank, for example, said that we could cut, you know, the industry could cut $20 billion of cost just from the clearing and settlement of public equities. But if public equities are not, you know, you don't need a bank to trade in the equity market, then what are you cutting cost from? The market might not exist. So it's best not to look just opportunistically, but strategically at what this can enable you to do that you couldn't do before.
All right. Thanks everyone for the discussion, for the vivid discussion. Thanks for the great questions. The book Blockchain Revolution, you can grab yourself a copy here, and I hope you're happy to sign.
Of course.
Some of them at least. Thanks everyone, and let's network and stay for a couple of white beers or general normal beers and grab something to eat.